Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back to a place that history books often mention in footnotes if at all. We're heading to a medieval town, but not to see the glorious castle or the magnificent cathedral. Instead, we're going to a darker, more desperate corner of the city, to a place where survival had a steep and painful price. You'll be stepping into the worn-out shoes of a young woman for whom all other doors have closed, leaving only one final, fateful option. You'd be lucky to make it through the first week, let alone the first day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The cobblestones are slick with a mixture of mud and things you'd rather not identify. It's late. The town watch has already made its rounds, his lantern swinging a lonely arc of light down the narrow alleyways, his voice calling out that all is well, a bitter irony to you. For you, nothing is well. Your stomach is a tight, aching knot of hunger and fear. Every option has been exhausted, every plea for charity met with a slammed door or a suspicious glare. You stand before the only place left that will take you in. It's a door, just like any other, made of heavy, splintering oak, but this one is different. Its frame is painted a dull, faded red. In many towns across Europe, this was the signal, a subtle but universally understood code. Red for sin, red for a place where flesh was sold. This isn't just a house, it's a legally sanctioned, municipally regulated brothel. It has a grim, official-sounding name in the town charters, something like the public house or women's health, but everyone just calls it what it is. Your hand, trembling on cold, hovers over the wood. For a moment, you consider turning back to face the gnawing hunger in the cold night on the streets. But the street offers only a slow, certain demise. This door offers a roof, a fire, and the slimmest chance of a meal. It's a bargain made in the currency of desperation. You take a shallow breath, the air thin and sharp, and you knock. The sound is swallowed by the thick wood. You wait. A small grill, a Judas window, slides open with a rasping sound. A pair of wary, tired eyes peer out, sizing you up from head to toe. They see your thin clothes, your gaunt face, the desperation you can't hide. There's no judgment in those eyes, only a weary recognition. The grill snaps shut. You hear the heavy sound of a bolt being drawn, and the door groans open just wide enough for you to slip inside. The warmth hits you first, thick and stifling. It's a humid mix of sweat, spilled ale, wood smoke from a struggling hearth, and a cloying, cheap floral scent meant to mask the other odors. It doesn't succeed. The main room is dim, lit by a few tallow candles that sputter and smoke, casting long dancing shadows on the grimy walls. A few men are scattered around on rough-hewn benches, a couple of weary travelers, a young, boastful-looking apprentice, and an older man in a merchant's cap, staring into his cup as if it holds all the world's sorrows. No one pays you much mind. You are just another shadow slipping into a room full of them. A few other women are present. One is sitting on a stool by the fire, mending a tear in her stocking with practiced indifference. Another is laughing a little too loudly at a mangy joke, her eyes hollow. You see in their faces a map of your own future. Historians to this day are still trying to untangle the threads of desperation and decision that led women like you to this very door. For the vast majority, it was a dead end, the final stop after famine, war, or being cast out by family left them with nothing. Yet, some scholars argue that for a tiny, tiny fraction, in an age where a woman's options were painfully limited, this was a conscious, albeit grim, economic choice over starvation or an abusive marriage. The line between coercion and choice was almost invisibly thin. A strange and unsettling thought crosses your mind in many German cities. These establishments were directly owned and operated by the town council. The city itself was the landlord, profiting from the very trade it publicly condemned. The same men who wrote the laws on public morality might be reviewing the quarterly earnings from this very house. The heavy door swings shut behind you with a solid, definitive thud. The sound of the wind in the alley is gone. The world you knew is locked outside. You are inside now, and your new life is about to begin. From a shadowed corner of the room, a woman detaches herself from the gloom and moves towards you. She is not one of the working girls. She is older, perhaps in her 40s, which in this era makes her a survivor of a great many hardships. Her dress is made of a sturdier wool than the thin linen of the others, and while it's patched and faded, it's clean. A ring of iron keys hangs from a leather cord at her waist, jangling softly with each step, a sound that seems to command the room's attention. You understand immediately it is the woman in charge. She stops in front of you, her eyes the same weary, assessing eyes you saw through the grill traveling over you once more. Up close you can see the fine lines etched around them, a testament to countless sleepless nights and shrewd calculations. She is the dame, the proprietress. In some of the more cynically minded towns, a woman in her position was sardonically referred to as the abbess, and the women who worked for her were her novices. A bitter joke, comparing this house of worldly sin to a house of God. Another stray, she says, her voice slow and gravelly, not unkind but utterly devoid of warmth. It's a statement of fact, not an insult. What's your name? You tell her, your own voice barely a whisper. She nods, though it's clear she'll likely just call you by the town you came from or some other impersonal nickname. You're hungry, she states again, not a question. You're cold. You've got nowhere else to go. Am I right? You can only nod, the lump of fear and humility in your throat too big to speak around. All right. She sighs, a sound of profound tiredness. Here's how it works. You'll live here. You'll get a place to sleep, a share of the stew, and a roof over your head. You'll be safe from the watch and from any ruffians on the street. This house is under the protection of the town council. She pats the keys at her hip, a gesture of authority. In return you work. You do what I say when I say. You entertain the clients I assign to you. You don't cause trouble, you don't steal, and you don't get sentimental. She pauses, letting the weight of her words sink in. This is your contract, sworn in a dim and smoky room, with desperation as your only witness. The money, she continues, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, all of it comes to me. Every last coin. From that, I take out for your bed, your board, your candles, your laundry. If you need new shoes, a dress, a ribbon, you come to me. I'll get it for you, and the cost will be added to your tally. You are in my debt, girl. Everything you get, you earn. This is the core of the system, a form of debt bondage that was merely impossible to escape. The dame held the ledger, always won. It's a niche, but chilling historical fact that in some jurisdictions, this debt was legally enforceable. A girl who tried to flee could, in theory, be brought back by the town guard to work off what her madam claimed she owed. The law, which supposedly protected you from street violence, was the very same instrument that could chain you to this place. You look into her face, trying to find a glimmer of something: pity, solidarity, a shared sense of womanhood. You find nothing but pragmatism. You wonder what her story is. Was she once like you, a terrified girl at this very door? Did she work her way up, saving scraps of coin, using her wits to survive until she could be the one holding the keys instead of the one being locked in? Historians still debate the role of these dames. Were they purely predators, the final, female face of a patriarchal system of exploitation? Or did they occupy a more complex, morally grey space? Some argue that they were, in their own way, protectors, creating a structured, albeit brutal, environment that was marginally safer than the alternative of freelance street work, which invariably ended in violence or death. Was she a jailer, or was she the warden of the only asylum available to you? Looking at her hard, impassive face, you suspect the answer is both. She is a survivor, and she will do what it takes to remain one, even if it means managing the misery of others. Get her cleaned up, the dame calls over her shoulder to the girl mending her stocking by the fire, and find her something to wear. The green tunic, the one Margit left behind. The name hangs in the air for a moment, an echo of someone who is no longer here. You don't dare ask what happened to Margit. The girl by the fire gives you a look of weary resignation and gets to her feet. The dame turns her back on you, her attention already on a new customer entering the room. You have been assessed, processed, and assigned your place. An entry in a ledger. The girl gestures for you to follow her deeper into the house, away from the smoky public room and into the warren of small, cramped spaces that will now be your entire world. You follow the other girl, whose name you learn is Elspeth, up a narrow, rickety set of stairs. The wood groans under your weight, and you have to duck your head to avoid hitting the low beam. The air grows even more stifling up here, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, stale sweat, and damp wool. This is the heart of the house, the private space where the business of survival is managed minute by minute. Elspeth leads you into a small windowless room. It's barely large enough for two thin straw-stuffed mattresses on the floor. A single, sputtering candle on a small crate provides the only light. This, she indicates with a tired gesture, is where you'll sleep. You'll be sharing the room, and likely the mattress with her. Privacy is a luxury you lost the moment you knocked on the red-framed door. She hands you a bundle of clothes, the green tunic of the departed Margit. It's made of a coarse, scratchy wool, faded from countless washings. It smells faintly of its previous owner, a ghost-like scent of old sweat and fear. But it's whole, unlike your own ragged dress. The dame her name's Methold, she has rules, Elspeth says, her voice flat, as if reciting a catechism Shes repeated 100 times. You don't listen, you don't eat. And so begins your education in the intricate, unwritten, and utterly non-negotiable laws of this household. First, the schedule. You wake before dawn, not to pray, but to do chores. The girls are responsible for all the domestic labor of the house, scrubbing the floors of the main room, emptying the chamber pots, hauling water from the public well, tending the fire, helping with the mending and the wateries to that will be the day's main meal. This work is part of what you earn Methold for your keep. It's a way of ensuring you are too tired to cause trouble and are constantly reminded of your dependent status. Second, personal conduct. There is no fighting. At least, not openly. Tensions between the girls are constant jealousy over a kinder client. A slightly larger portion of stew, a perceived slight. But Methold will not tolerate brawls or loud arguments. It's bad for business. All disputes are to be brought to her, and her judgment is final. The punishment for breaking this rule is swift today without food or, worse, being assigned the least desirable, most brutish client. You quickly learn that survival here depends on a kind of forced, silent cooperation. You might resent the girl sleeping next to you, but you rely on her to wake you if the watch is doing a surprise inspection, or to share a precious bit of gossip about a dangerous client. Third, and most importantly, the rules regarding clients. You are not allowed to refuse a client assigned to you by Methold. To do so is the ultimate act of defiance, and the consequences are dire. You are not to steal from them, no matter how tempting a full coin purse may be, left carelessly on a stool. If a client accuses a girl of theft, Methold will always side with the client. It doesn't matter if it's true. The house's reputation with its paying customers is paramount. The accused girl will be punished severely, often beaten and thrown out, carrying with her not only it to Methold, but now a reputation as a thief, making her life on the outside even more impossible. Then there are the stranger, more specific rules. On Sundays and holy days, you are to remain indoors and out of sight. The town's piety, however superficial, must be respected. During Lent, business slows to a crawl, and hunger in the house becomes a palpable, gnawing presence. You're also forbidden from speaking to respectable women on the street, if you are ever sent on an errand. You are to keep your eyes downcast and go about your business silently. You are a ghost in your own town. One of the most peculiar rules you learn is about food. The food you are given is bland and meager thin soup, hard bread. But any food or drink gifted to you by a client, an apple, a small meat pie, a sip of wine must be declared to Methold. She will then decide if you can keep it, if it should be shared, or if its value will be added to your ever-growing debt. Nothing is truly yours. This level of control is something that legal records from cities like Nuremberg and Augsburg actually support. The ordinances governing these houses were incredibly detailed. They specified what the women could wear, where they could go, and even regulated the fees the dames could charge for board and lodging, in a futile attempt to prevent unchecked exploitation. Historians are still trying to determine how strictly these external regulations were enforced. Did the town councillors genuinely try to curb the abuses of the dames? Or were these laws just for show, a way to maintain a facade of civic order, while profiting from the institution? The line between regulation and complicity was blurry at best. Elspeth finishes her litany of rules. She looks at you, her young face old with experience. Just keep your head down, she advises. Do the work, try not to think about it. That's the only way. You strip off your old, tattered clothes and pull on Margit's green tunic. The coarse wool scratches your skin, a constant, irritating reminder of your new reality. The fit is wrong, to loosen the shoulders, to tighten the chest. It's not your dress. You are not your own person anymore. You are a cog in Methal's machine, living under her roof, and bound by her rules. The flimsy mattress on the floor suddenly seems like the only solid thing in a world that has turned to quicksand beneath your feet. The next morning, before the first hint of grey light has touched the sky, Matheld hands you another item that seals your fate as surely as the red framed door did. It's not a uniform in the modern sense, but it serves the same purpose to mark you, to separate you from the honourable women of the town. It's a hood. Or in some towns it might be a striped skirt, a yellow ribbon sewn onto your sleeve, or a small bell on your shoe. The specific item varied from region to region, city to city, but the intent was universal. You are now required by law, not just Mathel-Dessau's rules, but the town's own ordinances, to wear a sign of your profession whenever you are outside the brothel's walls. The one Matheld gives you is a hood of a peculiar, jarringly bright yellow. It's a colour often associated with outcast heretics, for our moneylenders are now you. The fabric is cheap, the dye job uneven, but its message is unmistakable. It's a badge of shame, designed to make you instantly recognizable and to me respectable man from accidentally speaking to a woman of your station, thus sullying his own reputation. You wear this if you go to the well. You wear this if I send you to the baker for day-old bread. You never, ever go outside without it, Matheltas. Her voice finds you on the street without your colour. They can fine you, or whip you, or drag you back here. And the fine, my girl, will be added to your tally. You take the yellow hood. The wool is coarse between your fingers. You imagine pulling it over your head, the garish colour framing your face. It feels like a physical brand. This garment is meant to strip you of your individuality. You are no longer the girl with a name and a past, you are one of the women from the house with the red door, a flash of yellow in the corner of society's eye. Elspeth sees the look on your face. Later, when you are both scrubbing the floor with sand and cold water, she leans in close. It's better they see you coming, she whispers, her breath drumming in the cold air of the common room. That way, the ones she mean you harm can't pretend they mistook you for someone else. It's a shield in a funny sort of way. Her logic is twisted, born of a world where safety is a choice between bad and worse. She is right, of course. The hood that invites the scorn of respectable folk also eliminates the defense of any man who might assault you on the street. He could not claim he thought you were a merchant's wife. The law, in its own strange way, acknowledged your existence through this forced visibility, even as it condemned you. This practice of marking prostitutes is well documented across medieval Europe. In Florence, they wore bells. In Toulouse, a white knot on the shoulder. In England, striped hoods were common. It was a visual enforcement of the social order. One of the most fascinating and bizarre examples of this comes from 14th century London, where a woman was publicly shamed and paraded through the streets not for being a prostitute, but for dressing like a respectable woman. Her crime wasn't the trade itself, but the attempt to blur the social lines by abandoning her prescribed attire. The system demanded you know your place, and that you be seen to be in it. The very existence of these laws creates a paradox that historians still wrestle with. On one hand, the city is legally sanctioning your trade, creating a designated space for it, and even profiting from it. On the other, it is using the full force of its legal and social power to ostracize you, to make you a visible pariah. It's a system of simultaneous tolerance and condemnation. The town needs the service you provide as a perceived outlet for male aggression that protects other women, but it despises you for providing it. You are a necessary evil, and this yellow hood is the emblem of that contradiction. Later that day, Muffold sends you to the public well. Your heart pounds as you pull the yellow hood over your head. The fabric smells of dust and dye. You pick up the heavy wooden buckets and slip out the back door of the brothel. The world outside seems different now. The street is the same. The sounds are the same: a distant hammer from the blacksmith, a dog barking, the cry of a street vendor. But you are not the same. You feel the weight of unseen eyes on you. A pair of women, carrying their own buckets, see you approaching. They stop talking, pull their own drab hoods tighter, and deliberately turn their backs as you pass, creating a small, silent wall of piety between you and them. A group of young boys point and snicker. You keep your eyes fixed on the muddy ground in front of you, focusing only on the task of putting one foot in front of the other. The yellow hood doesn't just mark you for others, it changes how you see the world. It's a constant, physical reminder of the invisible wall that now separates you from the life you once knew. You are in the town, but no longer of it. You reach the well, fill your buckets with the freezing water, and begin the long, lonely walk back. The garish yellow of your hood a beacon of shame in the grey medieval morning. The moment you've been dreading arrives sooner than you expected. That same evening, Muffold approaches you as you're ladling out a meager portion of watery turnips for your own dinner. Her face is impassive, her voice flat. "You're up, girl," the merchant in the corner. Your stomach, already clenched from hunger and anxiety, tightens into a cold, hard knot. The spoon trembles in your hand. You look over at the man, the same one you saw yesterday, the one staring so intently into his cup. Older, with a soft, fleshy face and the well-fed paunch of a man who has never known true hunger. His eyes, when they meet yours across the dim room, are not cruel or leering, but filled with a profound, weary sadness that is almost more unsettling. Elspeth gives your arm a quick, encouraging squeeze as you walk past her, a small gesture of solidarity in a world that offers very little. You put down your bowl of stew untouched and walk towards the merchant's table. Every step feels like you're wading through thick, cold mud. This is it, the transaction, the reason you were given a roof and the promise of food. You sit down opposite him. The wooden stool is hard and uncomfortable. He pushes a small cup of watered down wine towards you. You murmur a thank you, your voice sounding strange and distant to your own ears. "You're new," he says, his voice a low rumble. It's not an accusation, just an observation. "Yes, sir," you reply, keeping your eyes downcast as Muffold instructed. Don't look them in the eye for too long. Don't speak unless spoken to. Be whatever they need you to be: a listening ear, a silent companion, a body. The silence stretches. It's awkward and heavy. You can hear the low murmur of other conversations in the room, the crackle of the fire, the clink of a coin on Muffold's table. This man doesn't seem to want what you expected. He doesn't touch you. He doesn't touch you. He doesn't make crude jokes. He just sits there, swirling the dregs of ale in his tankard. "I buried my wife 2 months ago," he says suddenly, his voice thick with emotion. "The fever took her. We were married for 20 years. He looks at you then, a direct, searching gaze. She had hair like yours, the color of ripe wheat. You don't know what to say. The script Muffold gave you has no lines for this. There's no witty retort or flirtatious giggle that fits. So you just sit there silent, your hands clenched in your lap. You are a paid confessor, a substitute for a warmth that is gone forever. His grief is a raw, open thing in the middle of this sordid, smoky room. After what feels like an eternity, he sighs, a long, shuddering sound of a man at the end of his rope. He reaches into a small pouch at his belt and pulls out a few coins, placing them carefully on the table. He stands up, gives you a stiff, formal little bow that is tragically out of place. You sit there for a moment stunned. The coins lie on the rough-spun wood of the table. You don't touch them. Muffold is there in an instant, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She scoops up the coins with a practiced, swift motion, and they disappear into the pouch at her waist. "Well done," she says, a rare, thin smile touching her lips. "He'll be back. The sad ones always are." That was your first transaction. It was nothing like the brutish, violent encounter you had feared, but in some ways it was more draining. You weren't just a body for hire, you were an empty vessel for a lonely man's sorrow. You sold him a half hour of pretending, of seeing his dead wife in a stranger's hair. You sold a memory. This is a side of the trade that is often lost in the broad strokes of history. It wasn't always about lust. For many men travelers far from home, widowers, or just the profoundly lonely, the brothel was a place to purchase a temporary illusion of companionship. It was one of the few places in medieval society where the rigid social barriers between classes and sexes could be, for a price, momentarily dissolved. A merchant could speak of his fears to you in a way he never could to his business partners or even his own family. However, this kind of encounter was the exception, not the rule. One of the ongoing debates among social historians is about the nature of the clientele. While literature and court records often highlight the high-class clients, nobles, clerics, wealthy merchants, day-to-day reality for most women in municipal brothel was likely far more grim. The bulk of the clientele would have been soldiers, sailors, apprentices, and local laborers, men with little money and often fueled by cheap air, whose desires were far less complicated and whose methods were far more coarse than the grieving merchants. You were lucky tonight. Elspeth's knowing look from across the room tells you as much. You go back to your bowl of stew. It's cold now, and the fat has congealed on the surface. You force yourself to eat it, every mouthful a reminder of what you had to do to earn it. The coins are already in Mathild's purse, a few more digits centered on the invisible ledger of your debt. You have survived your first job. But the night is still young, and there are other men in the room. A few days pass. You fall into the grim rhythm of the house chores in the morning, mending and waiting in the afternoon, working in the evening. You have other clients after the grieving merchant. A young apprentice who spends most of the time boasting about a fight he won. A quiet, nervous traveler who says almost nothing at all. A group of rowdy guardsmen who pay together and treat the transaction with a terrifying, business-like indifference. Each time, the ritual is the same. The man places the coins on the table or directly into Mathild's waiting hand. You see the glint of copper and, if you're lucky, the dull shine of silver. You know with a desperate certainty that you are earning your keep. You are bringing money into this house. Perhaps you think you can even start to pay down the debt on your ledger. Maybe, just maybe, there's a future where you can buy your way out. It's a fragile, foolish hope, and it's shattered one afternoon when your worn-out shoe finally gives up the ghost. The sole, already thin, splits completely, making it impossible to walk without the cold, muddy ground pressing against your foot. You have no choice but to go to Mathild. You find her in her small, private room at the back of the house, the one place that is truly hers. She's hunched over a large, leather-bound book, the ledger. Her lips move silently as she makes her calculations, her face a mask of intense concentration. This book is the house's true master. You knock softly on the doorframe, Dame Mathild. She looks up, her expression annoyed at the interruption. You show her your ruined shoe. I need new ones, you say, your voice small. I can't go to the well like this. She sighs, a theatrical sound of a woman beset by endless, costly problems. Shoes, she mutters, as if it's the most extravagant request in the world. Everything costs money, girl. Do you think shoes grow on trees? She makes a note in her ledger, scratching with a quill pen. Fine, I'll have the cobbler's boy sent round. But they'll be added to your tally. My tally? You ask? A flicker of courage igniting within you. But the money from the clients, the merchant, the guards, surely that's enough for a pair of shoes. Mathild puts down her quill and gives you a look that is part pity, part contempt. You think you're earning money? She scoffs. Let me explain something to you, little novice. She turns the ledger towards you, though not close enough for you to read the details. From every coin a client pays, the house that is, I take a share. Half. That's for the privilege of working here, for the roof, for my protection. This was a common arrangement, sometimes even codified in town law. The brothel keeper was entitled to a huge cut, often 50%, right off the top. Then, she continues, tapping a long bony finger on the page, we deduct your expenses. There's your board and lodging fee for the week. There's your share for the firewood and the candles. You used soap yesterday? That's a copper. I had to pay the laundress to wash the house linens. You pay a share of that. The wine the merchant bought you. He paid me for it. But I add a service charge to your tally for you drinking it. Her voice is calm and methodical, the voice of a seasoned accountant laying out the grim reality of a balance sheet. Your heart sinks. Every small act of survival, washing, staying warm, eating the food provided, is a transaction that pushes you deeper into debt. So these new shoes, she concludes, giving you a sharp look. The cobbler will charge me, say, 20 pence. That 20 pence goes on your tally. By my reckoning, after this week, you've almost paid for your food. The shoes will put you back under. You owe me, girl. You all do. You stare at her, the full, horrifying reality of your situation crashing down on you. It's a perfectly designed trap. You can never earn enough to get ahead because the cost of your own survival is constantly being inflated and added to your bill. The ledger is not a record of your earnings, it's a meticulously crafted cage. This system of debt peonage is one of the most brutal aspects of the medieval regulated brothel. While an independent streetwalker might keep what she earned, she faced constant violence and starvation. Here you are fed and housed, but you are enslaved. Historians looking at the surviving financial records of these houses see this pattern clearly. The women's debts mysteriously balloon, while the profits for the dame and the city, if it's the landlord, steadily increase. There's a strange, almost farcical tidbit from some German city regulations. They actually stipulated the maximum price a dame could charge for items like shoes or a tunic to prevent outright price gouging. The very existence of such laws proves that dames were regularly exploiting the girls by charging them triple the actual cost for basic necessities. The laws were an admission that the system was rigged. The argument among historians is whether these laws were ever effectively enforced or if they were just window dressing. You back away from Mathold's room, the cold reality chilling you more than the damp floor on your bare foot. You thought the currency of this place was sex. You were wrong. The true currency is debt. You don't sell your body to the clients you rent it from Mathild. And the rent is always due. The new shoes, when they arrive, will feel less like a comfort and more like another link in the chain holding you here. In the days that follow, the weight of your endless debt settles upon you like a physical shroud. The brief flicker of hope you once had is gone, replaced by a dull, grinding resignation. You are not alone in this feeling. It is the unspoken truth that hangs in the air between all the girls in the house. You are all sinking in the same leaky boat, and Mathild is the only one with a bucket. This shared predicament forges a strange and complicated bond between you and the other woman, Elspeth, the weary but pragmatic one, Liesel, a nervous girl who jumps at every loud noise and caption, older and harder, with a cynical joke for every misfortune. You are not quite friends. The houses inherit competition and Mathold's rules against cliques prevent true, open friendship, but you are allies in the quiet, and declared war against despair. This alliance manifests in small, almost invisible ways. It's in the way Elspeth will discreetly finish one of your chores if you're exhausted after a particularly difficult night. It's in the way Catrin will create a loud diversion to draw Mathild's attention if Liesel accidentally breaks a cup. It's in the shared glance over the rim of yours to ball, a silent acknowledgement of a shared injustice when Mathild and acknowledgement of a shared injustice when Mathild announces a new, arbitrary fee. You learn to communicate in a language of gestures and whispers. A slight narrowing of the eyes is a warning about a client's bad temper. A quick, almost imperceptible shake of the head is a signal that Mathild is in a foul mood. You begin to understand that your survival is tied not just to your own wits, but to the collective knowledge of this small, isolated community. One evening a new girl is brought in, much like you were, terrified, hungry, and alone. You see your own reflection in her wide, frightened eyes. While Mathild gives her the standard, soul-crushing speech, you see Elspeth catch Catrin's eye. Later, when the new girl is huddled by the fire, shivering, Catherine accidentally drops a small piece of bread near her while clearing a table. It's a tiny act of rebellion and compassion. It's a declaration that while Brothel owns your debts, she does not own your humanity. This fragile sorority is one of the most poignant and underdocumented aspects of life in these institutions. Official records and chronicles were written by men, and they focused on the sin, the regulation, the commerce. They rarely, if ever, recorded the internal social dynamics of the women themselves. What we know comes from piecing together clues from court cases, where women might testify for or against each other, and from reading between the lines of the dismissive accounts of moralists. Some historians argue that these bonds were purely pragmatic alliances of convenience necessary for survival in a hostile environment. Others contend that genuine friendships and emotional support networks must have formed. In a world that had stripped them of family and social standing, these women only had each other. They were, in a very real sense, a new, albeit tragic, form of family. The debate continues because personal, emotional records from these women simply do not exist. We are left to infer their inner lives from the cold, hard facts of their exploitation. The complexity of these relationships is revealed to you one afternoon. Liesel, the nervous one, receives a client who is rougher than most. When she comes back to the common room, there is a dark, blooming bruise on her cheek. She tries to hide it, but Brothel sees it instantly. "What is this?" Brothel demands, her voice sharp. "I told you, no marks. Damaged goods don't sell." She is not concerned for Liesel's well-being, but for her asset's value. Before Liesel can stammer out a reply, Catherine steps forward. "She fell on the stairs, dame," she says smoothly. "The top step is loose again. I saw it happen." It's a lie, and everyone knows it's a lie. But it's a plausible one. Brothel gives Catherine a long, hard stare. To accuse Catherine of lying would be to admit a client had harmed one of her girls, which is bad for business. It implies she can't control her own house. Reluctantly, she accepts the story. "Well, see that you're more careful," she snaps at Liesel, before turning her attention elsewhere. Liesel gives Catherine a look of profound, silent gratitude. But later you overhear Catherine whispering to Elspeth, "The little fool needs to learn to handle them better. Another mark like that and Brothel will throw her out. Then where will she be?" Her words are harsh, but underneath them is a layer of cold, practical fear for the other girl's survival. It's not simple kindness, it's a form of brutal mentorship. You learn a crucial lesson in this house: compassion is a luxury, but solidarity is a necessity. You and the other girls are like threads in a tapestry. Individually, you are weak and can be easily broken. But woven together through a web of shared secrets, silent support, and a common enemy in the form of the ledger, you create something stronger. It's not love, and it's not always friendship. It's a testament to the human instinct to create community, even in the most broken of places. As you spend more time in the house, you learn that the clients are not a monolithic entity. Each man who walks through the red-framed door is a gamble, a roll of dice. Your ability to quickly assess and categorize them becomes one of your most essential survival skills. It's a grim, intuitive science that you practice every single night. There are the regulars, like the sad merchant. They are predictable, often seeking a specific kind of comfort or routine. They are the least dangerous, and Brothel values them for their steady business. She often assigns them to the more experienced girls who know how to maintain the illusion the client is paying for. Then there are the travelers and merchants passing through town for a single night. They are an unknown quantity. They might be lonely and looking for conversation, or they might be looking to release the frustrations of a long journey. They pay reasonably well, but they are gone by morning, leaving no trace but the coins in Brothel's pouch. There is a certain anonymity with them that can be both a comfort and a danger. The most difficult and most common clients are the locals with little to their name, the apprentices, the journeymen, the city guards. They often arrive in loud, boisterous groups, their courage fueled by cheap ale from the tavern next door. They have little money to spend and are often looking to get the most for their few pennies. They are the ones most likely to be rough, demanding, and disrespectful. You learn to brace yourself when a group of them stumbles in, their laughter echoing too loudly in the small room. With them, the transaction is stripped of all pretense. It is a stark commercial exchange, and you are just the commodity. One evening, a new type of client appears, one that makes both the girls and Mathilde herself tense. A young man dressed in the dark robes of a university student slips into the room. He looks painfully out of place, his face pale and studious, his eyes darting around nervously as if he's afraid of being recognized. Students were a notoriously problematic clientele. They had very little money, but a great deal of arrogance. They often traveled to university towns far from home, free from the watchful eyes of their families for the first time. For them, visiting a brothel was a rite of passage, a subject for bragging rights and bawdy songs. Historical records from towns like Oxford and Paris are filled with accounts of clashes between town and gown, and the brothels were often the flashpoint for this conflict. Students were known for causing riots, skipping out on payments, and generally treating the women with a unique blend of intellectual disdain and youthful cruelty. Mathilde assigns him to you, perhaps because you are new and she wants to see how you handle a potentially difficult situation. You sit with him. He tries to affect an air of worldly sophistication, quoting lines of Latin poetry that you don't understand. He speaks of logic and theology, all while his knee nervously jitters up and down. You realize with a sinking heart that he's not just a client, he's a tourist. He's here for the story, for the experience, so he can go back to his dormitory and boast to his friends. You are just a chapter in his coming-of-age story. The entire encounter is humiliating, not because he is cruel, but because he is cruel, but because he is so utterly detached, treating you like a subject of academic curiosity. This is the strange lottery of your nights. You might get a grieving widower who just wants to talk, or a brutish soldier who sees you as less than human, or an insecure student trying to prove his manhood. Each one requires a different mask, a different performance. You become a reluctant actress, playing a role tailored to the man sitting across from you. One of the more peculiar tidbits of historical knowledge about the clientele is the existence of what some historians call pious sinners. These were men, sometimes even clerics though they would be in disguise, who frequented brothels but sought to mitigate their sin through acts of charity. A man might pay for a woman's time and then spend the entire session lecturing her on the state of her soul, urging her to repent. There are even accounts of clients paying a woman's exit fee from the brothel, essentially buying her freedom and financing her entry into a convent or a home for penitent prostitutes like the Magdalen houses. The motives for such acts are still debated by historians. Was it genuine piety and compassion, or was it a form of religious arrogance, a way for the man to feel righteous and charitable while still participating in the very system he condemned? For the woman involved, it would have been a bizarre, confusing, and potentially life-changing encounter. You learn to read the subtle cues, the quality of a man's coat, the calluses on his hands, the way he holds his cup, the look in his eyes. A man with ink stains on his fingers is likely a clerk, probably meticulous and quiet. A man with the scent of the taming yard on him might be coarse, but is usually straightforward. The soldiers are the easiest to spot and the hardest to handle. You pray for the quiet ones, the sad ones, the ones who are gone quickly. Every time the door opens, you hold your breath and you wait for the dice to land. One of your daily chores is hauling buckets of water from the well for washing, not just for scrubbing floors but for the perfunctory and often inadequate attempts at personal hygiene within the house. The very concept of sanitation as we know it today is a distant future dream. In this world, cleanliness is a constant, uphill battle fought with cold water, coarse soap, and a good deal of wishful thinking. The house has a small, damp alcove in the back, near the kitchen, which serves as the washing area. Here, a large wooden tub sits, filled each morning with frigid water themselves. There is no privacy. The water is shared. The soap, a harsh, greasy block that smells of animal fat and dash, is a communal property, and Mathilde keeps a close eye on its use, as it's a precious commodity. A clean girl is a profitable girl, she says often. A mantra that has nothing to do with health and everything to do with commerce. A client is more likely to pay for a woman who doesn't carry the stench of the day's labor. So you wash. You scrub your skin with the rough's open dicey water, a daily ritual that feels more like a punishment than a comfort. The linens are another constant struggle. The thin, scratchy sheets from the beds and the towels used for washing are a breeding ground for lice and fleas. They are washed infrequently in large vats of boiling water, a huge, labor-intensive task that takes up an entire day. You and the other girls take turns stirring the heavy, sodden fabrics with a large wooden paddle, the steam filling the air with the smell of wet wool and lye. Despite these efforts, the pests are a constant presence, a secret, itching misery that everyone endures but no one speaks of openly. This obsession with surface-level cleanliness creates a dangerous illusion of health. While the house might look passably clean to a client, it's a facade. The underlying realities of medieval hygiene, or the lack thereof, are inescapable. The latrine in the back courtyard is little more than a covered pit, smelling foully in the summer and freezing in the winter. The water from the public well is often contaminated, a source of the constant stomach ailments that plague the town. It is in this environment that you learn about the more intimate and terrifying aspects of hygiene in your profession. After a client, you are expected to use a basin of water and a cloth to cleanse yourself. Sometimes, the water is laced with vinegar or other folk remedies, astringent solutions that are believed incorrectly to prevent disease. Elspeth teaches you the routine, her movements practical and devoid of emotion. This brings us to a rather strange and often misunderstood piece of history, the syphilis bath. For a long time, it was believed that mercury baths were a common medieval treatment for syphilis. You'd see illustrations in old medical texts of people sitting in tubs, breathing in toxic fumes. However, this is a bit of a historical mix-up. The great syphilis epidemic that swept across Europe really took hold at the very end of the medieval period and into the Renaissance, after Columbus's voyages. While there were certainly other venereal diseases, the Great Pox, as it was known, wasn't the boogeyman in, say, the 14th century that it would become in the 16th. The real hygienic threat of your time is much more mundane and just as dangerous: constant infections, skin diseases like scabies, and the ever-present risk of unwanted pregnancy. The methods for preventing conception are a desperate blend of superstition and folk medicine. Potions made of herbs like pennyroyal or Queen Anne's lace are secretly brewed and shared among the women. These concoctions are unreliable and often toxic, as likely to make you violently ill as they are to work. Other methods are based on rhythm and guesswork, with no real understanding of human biology. Historians still debate the effectiveness and prevalence of these early forms of contraception and hygiene. The Church condemned such practices as a sin, a deliberate frustration of God's will, so any knowledge was passed down secretly, from woman to woman. It's a hidden history whispered in back rooms, because to be caught with contraceptive herbs could lead to accusations of witchcraft. The line between a healer and a witch was dangerously thin, and for women in your position, any association with dark arts could be a death sentence. One day, you notice Liesel has been using the washing alcove more frequently. She is quiet and withdrawn, and there's a new, sharp fear in her eyes. Catherine notices it too. She waits until Mathold is occupied with the delivery man, then corners Liesel, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "Are you late?" Liesel's terrified silence is all the answer she needs. Catherine's face hardens. "Foolish girl," she mutters, but then her expression softens almost imperceptibly. "I know a woman, an old midwife near the docks. She has remedies, but it will cost, and Mathold can never know." You realize then that the battle for hygiene in this house is fought on two fronts. The first is the visible, public one, the scrubbing and washing to present a clean face to the world. The second is the secret, desperate one, the whispered remedies and dangerous potions used to manage the hidden consequences of the trade. Both are a matter of survival, and a single mistake on either front can have devastating results. Sunday morning arrives, and with it, one of the most jarring contradictions of your new life. The town bells begin to peal, their deep, resonant chimes calling the faithful to Mass. On any other day of the week, the town bustles with commerce and labor. But on some day, a blanket of prescribed piety descends. The market is closed, the workshops are silent, and the streets are filled with families in their best, sober-colored clothes, making their way to the parish church. Inside the brothel, a strange quiet falls. By town ordinance, the house is closed for business. The red frame door is barred from the inside. and no clients are permitted until after the evening Vesper service. This is not for your benefit, not a day of rest. It is a concession to public morality. The town tolerates your existence on weekdays, but on the Lord's day, you must become invisible. But the contradiction runs deeper. You are not simply expected to be invisible, you are, in many towns, legally required to attend church. Mathold gathers you and the other girls in the common room. Get your cloaks and your hoods, she says. It's time. You pull on your drab cloak and the hated yellow hood that marks you as a woman of sin. You are to go to the church, the house of God, and publicly display your shame before the respectable folk of the town. It is a weekly ritual of institutionalized hypocrisy. You walk to the church as a group, a small, silent procession of outcasts. People on the street part to let you pass, mothers pulling their children closer, men averting their eyes or casting looks of contempt. You are a living sermon on the wages of sin paraded for all to see. When you enter the church, you are not allowed to sit with the general congregation. You are directed to a specific, segregated area, usually at the very back, near the door, or sometimes in a separate gallery known as the sinner's porch. This is your designated spot, a spiritual quarantine to prevent your corruption from tainting the other parishioners. From here, you can barely see the priest at the altar, his brightly colored vestments a world away. You can hear the droning of the Latin Mass, the soaring notes of the choir, but it all feels disconnected, a ceremony for other people in which you are a reluctant, despised spectator. The priest's sermon is inevitably about sin. He thunders from the pulpit about temptation, damnation, and the fires of hell. He speaks of fallen women and the imperative of repentance. Though he never looks directly at your section, you feel the weight of every word. The sermon is aimed at you, a public condemnation you are forced to sit and absorb. The faces of the other parishioners are a mixture of pious agreement and smug satisfaction. They are the righteous, you are the damned. It's a bizarre and cruel piece of social engineering. Why force you to attend? For the moralists and town leaders, it was a multi-purpose tool. It was a form of public shaming, a weekly reminder of your lowly status. It was also, in their eyes, a chance for your salvation. They genuinely believed that by forcing you to hear the word of God, they might inspire you to repent and leave your sinful life. For them, it was a spiritually rehabilitative measure, like a fourth. The actual experience for the women themselves is a subject of historical speculation. Did any of them find genuine comfort in the ritual? Was the quiet sanctity of the church, however segregated, a brief respite from the squalor of the brothel? Or was it, as it feels to you now, a weekly exercise in ritualized humiliation? There's a fascinating ongoing debate among historians about the personal piety of medieval prostitutes. Some wills and court records show these women leaving money to the church or praying to specific saints, particularly Mary Magdalene, the patron saint of fallen women. It suggests a complex spiritual life, one that existed despite the church's official condemnation. They may have rejected the institution that shamed them, but not the faith itself. During the sermon, you steal a glance at the other girls. Liesel is staring at her hands, her face pale. Elspeth has a look of pure bored indifference, as if she has mentally checked out completely. Katrin, however, is watching the congregation, her eyes lingering on the well-dressed merchants and city officials sitting in the front pews with their families. Her expression is unreadable, a mixture of contempt and calculation. You wonder how many of those pious-looking men she recognizes from late-night visits to the brothel. The hypocrisy is suffocating. The very society that creates the economic conditions that force you into this life, the very men who are your clients, are the ones who now sit in judgment, listening to a sermon about your wickedness. When the Mass ends, you are required to wait until the rest of the congregation has departed before you are allowed to leave. You file out of the empty church and back into the daylight. The yellow of your hood's a shocking slash of color against the grey stone. The walk back to the brothel is as silent as the walk there. The door is unbarred, you step back inside, and the performance of piety is over for another week. The brief, strange interlude of sacred time is over, and the profane reality of your life resumes. The relationship between the brothel and the town's governing body is a tangled, contradictory mess, and you start to see the threads of it more clearly. The house is not some hidden, illegal enterprise operating in the shadows. It is a known, regulated, and, in a strange way, protected part of the city's infrastructure. One afternoon, two men in official-looking livery knock on the door. They aren't clients. They are bailiffs from the town hall. Brothel meets them at the door, her demeanor shifting from the harsh taskmaster you know to one of fawning, respectful deference. She offers the mail, which they accept, and they sit at a table in the corner, speaking in low, serious tones. Elspeth, while pretending to polish pewter mugs, positions herself just close enough to overhear snippets of their conversation. Later, she shares the intel with you. It's the quarterly tax, she whispers, and a sanitation inspection. You learn that Brothel has to pay a hefty tax to the city council for the right to operate. This brothel is, for all intents and purposes, a licensed business. The city profits directly from your trade. This is the great, open secret of the town, the same council of pious, bearded men who legislate your Sunday church attendance and the color of your hood are landlords to your misery. Some German cities like Nuremberg went a step further and directly owned and managed the municipal brothel. The Frauenhaus is a public utility, with the profits going straight into the city's coffers. The sanitation inspection is an even bigger farce. The bailiffs will cast a cursory glance around the common room, check that the shutters aren't broken, and make a note in their records that all is in order. They have no interest in the real state of hygiene, the leaking roof in the dormitory, or the quality of the food. The inspection is a bureaucratic ritual, a way for the city to maintain the pretense of oversight. As long as the house isn't causing public riots and the tax is paid on time, the council is content to look the other way. This municipal control extends beyond taxes and inspections. The city also sets the rules. There are official ordinances posted at the town hall that dictate the brothel's operating hours. They might specify the maximum number of women allowed to work in the house. In some cities, the law even dictated the minimum price for a transaction, a bizarre form of price control meant to prevent streetwalkers from undercutting the official taxable brothel. You are living inside a paradox, an enterprise that is simultaneously legal and illegal, supported and condemned. The city needs the brothel to exist. The pervading belief at the time, famously articulated by theologians like Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine, was that prostitution was a necessary evil. It was seen as a sewer that drained away the filth of male lust, thereby protecting respectable women, the wives and daughters of citizens, from assault. The brothel was a social pressure valve. By containing illicit sex within a specific, regulated space, the city believed it was maintaining public order. This creates a fascinating and still debated historical question: was this regulation a form of protection for the women, or a more efficient form of exploitation? On one hand, the municipal backing offered a degree of safety. A client who assaulted a woman inside a licensed brothel could, in theory, be held accountable by the city guard, as it was a disruption of the peace in a city-sanctioned establishment. Brothel protection, which she lorded over you, was very real in that sense. You were safer from random violence here than you would be on the street. On the other hand, this same system trapped you completely. The laws that protected the institution of the brothel also reinforced Brothel's power over you. Your debt was a private matter between you and her, a matter the bailiffs had no interest in. The city's primary concern was not your welfare, but the smooth, profitable operation of the house. You were a cog in a civic machine, and your well-being was secondary to the machine's function. You see this firsthand a few days later. A fight breaks out in the common room. A drunken client, a wool merchant's son, refuses to pay what he owes. He shoves another girl, and she falls hard. The noise attracts the attention of the night watch. Two guards enter, their faces grim. You expect them to arrest the belligerent client. Instead, they speak directly to Brothel. After a heated, whispered exchange and the subtle passing of a coin from her hand to the guard, they simply haul the disruptive client out and throw him onto the street. No arrest is made. The girl he shoved is ignored. The only crime that was punished was the disruption of business. Order has been restored. The city's peace has been maintained. the brothel can continue to operate. And you are left with the chilling understanding that the law is not here to protect you, it is here to protect the house you are trapped in. The town hall's gaze is a landlord's gaze, concerned with property and profit, not the people within the walls. You are not a citizen to be protected, you are part of the inventory. As you navigate the treacherous social landscape of the house, you begin to realize there are two languages being spoken. The first is the plain, coarse tongue of everyday life. The second is a secret language, a slang or cant, used by the women to communicate in front of Brothel and the clients without being understood. Elspeth is your primary teacher. She introduces you to the words in brief, whispered asides. A client isn't just a client. A generous one might be a sweet purse. A violent or dangerous one is a ruffle or a bore. A man who talks endlessly without spending much is a chatterbox. The act itself is never called by its plain name, it's the work, the game, or more cynically, paying the rent. Brothel is the abyss or the spider, depending on her mood. The city guard or the walls. Money has its own set of codes. A small copper coin might be a mite, while a silver coin is a moon. This isn't just for secrecy, it's a way of emotionally distancing yourselves from the grim reality of the transactions. Talking about plucking a sweet purse for 2 moons sounds like something out of a fairy tale. A far cry from the sordid truth. It's a thin layer of poetry spread over a harsh reality. This secret language extends to warnings and signals. If a girl says the parson's lost his prayer book again, it's a coded warning that a particularly hypocritical or demanding client has just walked in. A seemingly innocent phrase like, "Did you mend that torn stocking?" might be a question about whether a girl has recovered from a difficult encounter. You start to pick it up, first by listening, then by tentatively using the words yourself. The first time you correctly use a slang term and see a flicker of understanding and approval in Catherine's eyes, you feel a small, strange sense of achievement. You are no longer a complete outsider. You are learning the dialect of your new country. This phenomenon of a criminal or outcast target is not unique to brothels. Thieves, cant, beggars, slang, these secret languages have existed in marginalized communities throughout history. They serve a dual purpose: to facilitate communication within the group and to exclude and confuse outsiders, particularly authorities. For the women in the house, it is a small way of reclaiming power. They can openly comment on a client, right to his face, and he remains oblivious, hearing only what he believes to be idle female chatter. One of the most interesting and debated aspects for linguists and historians is how these cants develop and spread. Are they consciously invented, or do they evolve organically? In the context of a medieval brothel, it was likely a mix of both. Some terms might be brought in by women from other towns or from other underground communities. Others might be invented on the spot, a clever turn of phrase that catches on because it so perfectly captures a specific experience. The constant influx of new women and the transient nature of the clients would create a fertile ground for linguistic innovation. A particularly quirky and specific example of historical slang comes from a slightly later period but illustrates the principle perfectly. In Elizabethan London's underworld, a body basket was a term for a prostitute who feigned pregnancy by stuffing her dress, a ruse used to garner sympathy or to avoid being sent to a brutal workhouse. The slang is wonderfully descriptive, capturing the essence of the deception in just 2 words. While we have more records from the Elizabethan era's vibrant underworld literature, it's certain that similar now-lost terms existed in your time. You witness the practical application of this secret language one evening. A wealthy-looking merchant dressed in fine Flemish wool enters the house. He is loud, arrogant, and clearly accustomed to getting his own way. Brothel, seeing his full coin purse, is all smiles and assigns him to Catherine. As Catherine leads him towards one of the small side rooms, she catches Elspeth's eye and casually remarks, "I hope this one doesn't have a taste for Gascony wine." It sounds like a simple random comment, but Elspeth stiffens slightly. Later, she explains it to you. Gascony wine was notoriously expensive and often associated with men who made grand promises but were slow to actually pay. It was a warning: this man is a peacock, all flesh and no substance. He will be demanding, and Brothel will have to be watched closely to ensure she gets the full payment from him before he leaves. The code worked. The warning was passed. Katrin was prepared. You realize this language is a shield, a weapon, and a bond. It's a shared secret in a house where you own nothing else. Speaking it is an act of defiance, a way of saying that even if your bodies are for sale, your minds and your words are still your own. It is the language of the unheard, spoken in the brief, quiet moments between transactions. The chill of autumn deepens into the biting cold of winter. The dampness in the house becomes a constant, creeping presence that seeps into your bones. A chorus of coughs echoes through the dormitory at night. In this close, unsanitary environment, sickness spreads like fire in a dry field, and with it comes a fear that is more profound and immediate than the fear of a violent, or the despair of your death, the fear of disease. In your era, medicine is a crude and often brutal affair, a mixture of folklore, religion, and the flawed theories of ancient Greek physicians. The understanding of how disease spreads is almost non-existent. Illness is often seen as a divine punishment for sin, a miasma in the air, or an imbalance of the bodies for humors. For the women in the brothel, already branded as sinners, falling ill carries a double burden. It is seen as a physical manifestation of their moral corruption. You see this firsthand when Maisel's persistent cough worsens. It becomes a deep, rattling sound that shakes her thin frame. She grows pale and weak, and soon she is too sick to work. At first, Brothel treats it as an annoyance. Useless girl, she mutters, watching Liesel huddle by the fire, shivering despite the heat, costing me money. Brothel's remedy is a noxious-smelling herbal brew that only seems to make Liesel weaker. When that fails, she resorts to the common medical practice of the day bleeding. A traveling barber surgeon, a man whose skills include pulling teeth and lancing boils, is called in. You watch in horror as he makes a small incision on Liesel's arm, draining a bowl of her blood. The theory is that this will release the bad humors that are causing the illness. In reality, it only weakens her further. The fear among the other girls is palpable. Sickness is a death sentence in this house, but not necessarily from the illness itself. A girl who cannot work is a drain on resources. She consumes food and firewood but generates no income. Brothel's patience is finite. If a girl remains ill for too long, she will be cast out. To be sick and homeless in a medieval city, especially in winter, is to be condemned to a slow, lonely death in some forgotten alleyway. This is the terrifying reality that sits behind every cough and every fever. The house offers a grim sort of safety, but only to the able-bodied. There is no sick leave, no compassion for the infirm. You are a commodity, and damaged goods are discarded. You and the other girls do what you can for Liesel in secret. You sneak her extra scraps of bread. You make sure her blanket hasn't slipped off in the night. It's a risk. To be seen as being too close to the sick girl is to invite Brothel's suspicion and anger, but you do it anyway. It's a small act of defiance against the house's brutal calculus. The shadow of venereal disease also looms large. Though it is poorly understood, people know that the work can lead to sores, rashes, and other debilitating ailments, but they don't know why. These illnesses are lumped together under general terms like the pox or the French disease. The treatments are useless and often horrific. Mercury rubs, which would become more common later, were one option. Another, more arcane treatment, involved the use of Cumwood, a substance imported at great expense from the New World, which was brewed into a tea. The belief was that this holy wood could sweat the disease out of the body. Of course, it did nothing. One of the ongoing debates for medical historians is trying to retrospectively diagnose these historical diseases. Based on vague descriptions in old texts, are they talking about gonorrhea, chlamydia, or non-venereal infections that were simply blamed on the woman's profession? It's a difficult, often impossible task. The lack of precise diagnostic language makes the historical record a murky swamp of symptoms and superstitious explanations. A strange and little-known fact is that some towns actually had regulations attempting to deal with this. In some municipal brothels there were mandatory inspections of the women by a city-appointed physician or midwife. A woman found to be unclean or diseased would be forbidden from working. This sounds progressive, like an early form of public health policy. However, the reality was grim. There was no treatment offered. The woman was simply ejected from the brothel, her source of income and shelter gone, left to spread the disease further or die. It wasn't about her health, it was about protecting the clients. As Liesel's condition worsens, Mathal's patience wears out. One morning she announces that Liesel is to be sent to a laser house, a leper hospital on the outskirts of town. Everyone knows this is a lie. The leper houses wouldn't take her. It's a euphemism for being cast out. That afternoon, two of Mafia thugs, rough men who occasionally act as bouncers, carry a protesting, feverish Liesel out of the house. They don't even let her take her cloak. The door closes behind her, and she is gone. A profound, terrified silence settles over the common room. Everyone is thinking the same thing: it could have been me. That night, a new girl is brought in to take Liesel's place on the mattress. The machine moves on, ruthlessly efficient. You lie awake in the dark, listening to the new girl's quiet sobs, and you feel the icy grip of fear around your own heart. In this house, your body is your only currency, and your health is the only thing standing between you and the cold, unforgiving street. Life in the house is a monotonous grind of fear, exhaustion, and degradation. Kindness is a foreign currency, a treasure you've long since stopped searching for. And then, one bleak afternoon, it appears in the most unexpected of forms. It comes from a man named Thomas, a stonemason working on the repairs of the nearby cathedral. HES not a typical client. HES young, quiet, and carries the fine white dust of his trade on his clothes and in the lines of his hands. He comes to the house not in the loud, boisterous evenings, but in the quiet lull of the late afternoon, when the place is mostly empty. He doesn't ask for any of the other girls. He asks for you. The first time he pays Mathilde, and you sit with him at a small table. He doesn't try to touch you or regale you with stories. Instead, he asks you questions. Not prying, intrusive questions, but gentle ones. He asks what your name is, your real name. He asks what the village you came from was like. He listens, truly listens, to you walk through the red-framed door. You feel like a person, not a product. He comes back a few days later. This time he brings something with him, hidden in a small cloth pouch. After paying Mathilde for your time, he waits until she is distracted and discreetly slides the pouch across the table to you. Inside is a small, slightly misshapen apple. "It's from my sister's garden," he whispers, a shy smile on his face. "Not much, but it's sweet." You stare at the apple. It's a simple, humble gift, but in this place, it feels like a jewel. According to house rules, you are supposed to declare it to Mathilde, who would likely confiscate it or add its value to your debt. But the way he gave it to you, the secrecy of the gesture, makes it clear this is for you and you alone. You hide it in the folds of your tunic, your heart pounding with a mixture of fear and a strange, unfamiliar warmth. Later, in the cramped dormitory, you eat the apple in secret, huddled under your thin blanket. You eat it slowly, core and all, not wanting to waste a single crumb. The crisp, sweet flesh is a revelation after weeks of watery stew and hard bread. But it's more than the taste. It's the act of kindness behind it. It's a gesture that exists outside the brutal economy of the house. He asked for nothing in return. It was a gift, freely given. Thomas continues to visit. He never stays long. He pays his due to Mathilde, and you talk. He tells you about his work, about the saints he is carving for the cathedral's facade, about the simple frustrations of a stone that weren't chipped correctly. You find yourself looking forward to his visits, to these small oases of normalcy in a desert of exploitation. His presence is a reminder that there is a world outside these walls, a world where people talk and listen and share small kindness without a price tag attached. This kind of interaction is, of course, exceptionally rare and dangerously so. Any hint of a genuine connection between a girl and a client is a threat to Mathilde's control. It introduces emotion into a purely commercial environment. If you were to develop feelings for a client, you might refuse others, or worse, try to run away with him. The existence of such relationships is one of the more romanticized and, historians argue, least common outcomes for women in your position. The trope of the prostitute with a heart of gold who is rescued by a loving client is a powerful one in literature and film. However, the historical reality was far grimmer. While a man might form an attachment to a particular woman, the vast social chasm between a respectable craftsman and a brothel worker was almost impossible to bridge. Marriage was, in 99.9% of cases, completely out of the question. At best, a man might set a woman up as his mistress, but this was a precarious position, entirely dependent on his continued affection and financial support. There is, however, a fascinating and little-known historical precedent for a form of redemption through clients. In some cities, the guilds, the powerful associations of craftsmen like stonemasons, weavers or bakers, had a complex relationship with the local brothel. On one hand, the young unmarried apprentices and journeymen of the guilds were a core part of the clientele. On the other, the guilds were obsessed with maintaining the honor of their craft. Some guild statutes from the period include bizarre clauses that state if a guild member marries a prostitute, he can be expelled from the guild, losing his livelihood. Yet, there are also conflicting records of guilds occasionally making charitable donations to Magdalene laundries or other institutions for fallen women. It's a historical contradiction that scholars are still trying to unpack. Was it guilt, piety, or a pragmatic desire to keep the sewer from overflowing into their respectable life? Your relationship with Thomas, however chaste and simple, does not go unnoticed. One afternoon, Catherine corners you. "Be careful, little bird," she says, her voice slow and serious, not mocking for once. The spider is watching. She doesn't like favorites. It makes the other girls jealous, and it makes you unreliable. Her warning is a bucket of cold water. You realize the danger you are in. This small ray of light, this single thread of human connection, is a liability. It makes you vulnerable. Thomas's kindness, as genuine as it is, could be the very thing that brings Mathias's wrath down upon you, making your life here even more unbearable. The apple, which had tasted so sweet, now leaves a bitter aftertaste of fear in your mouth. Catherine's warning proves prophetic. A few days after you share the secret apple with Thomas, Mathias calls you to her small, cramped room at the back of the house. The air in the room is stale, thick with the scent of old paper and cheap wax. This is the nerve center of her small empire, and you have been summoned to the throne of the spider herself. She doesn't ask you to sit. She stands by her high desk, the great leather-bound ledger open before her. The book is the most intimidating object in the house. It's filled with names and numbers, a complex web of debt and obligation, all written in Mathias's spittery, precise script. It is the book of your life, or at least, the life she has assigned to you. "The stonemason," she says without preamble. Her voice is cold and flat. He seems to have taken a liking to you. You stand silently, your heart hammering against your ribs. You try to keep your face a blank mask, betraying nothing. He pays his coin, she continues, tapping a long, bony finger on a column of figures. He's a good customer, punctual. No trouble. She pauses, her sharp eyes boring into you. But you're becoming a distraction. You look for him. You look for him. You wait for him. She is of course right. The hope of his visits has made the rest of your existence here even more unbearable by contrast. "Let's review your account, shall we?" she says, a cruel smile playing on her lips. She turns the ledger slightly, so you can see the page with your name at the top. It's a dizzying mess of columns and entries. "Here," she says, her finger tracing a line. "This is your signing fee. The cost of my accepting you into this house when you were starving on the street. A debt of gratitude, you might say. It's an arbitrary invented number, the foundation of your servitude. And here," she continues, moving her finger down the page, "is your weekly board and lodging, and the charge for firewood, and for laundry, and for the soap you use. Oh, and here the new shoes. Aye, hefty sum." She then points to another column. "And this is your earnings. You see a list of small sums, the pittance that is your share of the client's payments. The numbers are pitifully small compared to the ever-growing column of your debts. It's a visual representation of the trap you're in. The numbers on the right will never, ever catch up to the numbers on the left. By my calculation," she says, the faint smile gone, replaced by a look of stern authority, "you are more in my debt now than the day you arrived. You are not profitable, girl. You are a bad investment. The cold, commercial language is like a slap in the face. You are not a person to her. You are a line item, an asset that is underperforming. So, she says, closing the ledger with a soft final thud, you will no longer be seeing the Stonemerson. I'll assign him to one of the other girls. Catherine, perhaps. She understands the nature of our business. You will take the clients I give you, whenever they come. You will work harder to pay what you owe me. Or, the next time the bailiffs come for a girl who is unfit for work, it will be your name I give them. The threat is clear and terrifying. Being thrown out is a death sentence. The use of these ledgers was a key to love control for the dames. While we don't have a huge number of them that have survived, the ones that have been found and studied by historians are chilling. They reveal this system of inflated expenses and debt bondage in stark, undeniable detail. Everything was commodifized. A ribbon, a meal, a sliver of soap, all of it was meticulously recorded to keep the women tethered. One of the fascinating academic debates around these documents is one of literacy. Most of the women who worked in these houses were illiterate. They had no way of verifying the dame's accounting. They had to take her word for it that their debt was what she claimed it was. The ledger was a symbol of a power they could not access or challenge. The dame's ability to read and write, a skill that was rare enough, but especially for women of her station, was a potent weapon in her arsenal of control. Was Mathild's ledger an accurate if predatory accounting, or was it pure fiction, the numbers manipulated at her whim to suit her needs? Without the ability to read it yourself, you would never know. You leave her room, your body trembling with a mixture of rage and helplessness. She has taken the one small spark of light in your life and extinguished it, not out of cold, hard business logic. She has reasserted her absolute control. The ledger is her Bible, and debt is her God. You are just a sinner in her church, and you will work to pay off your penance for a lifetime. The weight of those phantom numbers presses down on you, heavier than any physical chain. The rhythm of the town is dictated by the seasons and the church calendar, but it's also punctuated by moments of riotous, chaotic energy. Fairs, market days, and religious festivals are the lifeblood of the medieval city. For most citizens, they are a time of celebration, a welcome break from the drudgery of daily life. For you and the women of the brothel, they are something else entirely, a period of intense work, heightened danger, and the slimmest chance of opportunity. When the annual autumn fair comes to town, the city transforms. The main square, usually a place of sober commerce, becomes a vibrant, noisy carnival. Merchants from distant lands set up colorful stalls, selling exotic spices, fine cloth, and strange trinkets. Jugglers, musicians, and traveling players perform for crowds of gawking peasants who have flocked in from the surrounding countryside. The air is thick with the smell of roasting meat, mulled wine, and livestock. For the brothel, this is the busiest time of the year. The town is flooded with men, traveling merchants with full purses, farmers with a year's savings to spend, bored squires accompanying their lords, and countless other wanderers and drivers. They are all far from home, anonymous in the crowd, and looking for entertainment after a day of carousing. Mathild prepares for the fair like a general preparing for battle. She buys extra ale, lays in a store of cheap candles, and gives the house a thorough, if superficial, cleaning. She is tense, watchful, and energized. This is her harvest season. You will all work tonight, she announces, her eyes gleaming with avarice. No complaining, no excuses. There's good money to be made. Be quick, be smart, and don't cause trouble. The house, which is usually just grimly busy, becomes a frantic, chaotic hub. The common room is packed with men. Shoulder to shoulder, their voices a deafening roar. The air is so thick with smoke and sweat you can barely breathe. There's no time for the sad stories of widowers or the nervous poetry of students. The transactions are swift, impersonal, and constant. You are passed from one man to another, a faceless commodity in a frantic market. The danger is palpable. With the drink flowing freely in the boisterous atmosphere of the fair, the men are bolder and more aggressive. Mathild and her hired thugs are constantly on patrol, breaking up fights before they can escalate, dragging out men who are too drunk or violent. But they can't be everywhere at once. You learn to be hypervigilant, to spot the bores before they can cause harm, to use a sharp word or a quick retreat to de-escalate a dangerous situation. Terrifying work. Yet, amidst the danger, there is a strange sliver of opportunity. With so many clients and so much money changing hands so quickly, Brothel can't watch everyone all the time. A client, flushed with wine and generosity, might press a small coin directly into your hand, a tip that the house rules strictly forbid. You learn to accept it with a lightning-fast, discreet movement, hiding it in a small secret pocket you've sewn into the lining of your tunic. This is a huge risk. If Brothel catches you, the punishment would be severe. But the lure of owning a single coin, a piece of currency that isn't immediately swallowed by the ledger, is intoxicating. It's not about the value of the coin itself, it's about the act of possessing it. It's a tiny spark of agency in a life of complete powerlessness. The relationship between festivals and prostitution is a well-documented one. Civic authorities knew that large gatherings of men would lead to an increased demand for prostitutes. In some cases, they would even temporarily suspend some of the more restrictive rules. For instance, the prohibition against being on the streets after dark might be lifted during a major fair, allowing women to solicit clients more openly. It was a pragmatic admission that trying to enforce morality during such a chaotic time was a losing battle. A particularly fascinating and bizarre historical fact is the concept of the carnival king or mode of misrule. During certain festivals, traditional social hierarchies were temporarily inverted. A peasant could be crowned king for a day, and the rules of propriety were gleefully broken. This atmosphere of world turned upside down often extended to sexual mores. For the duration of the festival, the brothel wasn't just a sordid necessity on the edge of town, it became a central, almost celebrated part of the festivities. This brief period of license, however, always ended, and the traditional, repressive order would be harshly reimposed. The night of the fair is a blur. You lose track of time, of the number of men, of the endless cycle of forced smiles and quick transactions. By the time the first grey light of dawn seeps through the grimy shutters, the house is finally quiet. The last of the revelers have staggered out. The common room is a disaster zone of overturned stools, spilled ale, and stale smoke. You and the other girls are utterly spent, your bodies aching, your minds numb. You collapse onto your straw mattresses, too tired to even speak, but before you fall into a dreamless, heavy sleep, you secretly touch the small, hard outline of the single copper coin in your hidden pocket. It's a pathetic treasure, a pittance earned at great cost. But it's yours, and in the grim arithmetic of your life, that feels like a victory. The stream of clients that flows to the house is mostly composed of the common man, soldiers, craftsmen, students, and farmers. But one evening a different kind of man walks through the door, a man who sends a ripple of hushed silence through the room. He is dressed in fine, dark wool, his face is clean-shaven, and he carries himself with an air of quiet, unshakable authority. He is a man of substance, a member of the town council. One of the very men who writes the laws that condemn you. You've seen him before from a distance, during the humiliating Sunday procession to church. He sits in the front pew with his stern-faced wife and perfectly behaved children, his face a mask of piety as he listens to the priest's sermon on the evils of the flesh. To see him here, in this house of sin, is a shock that borders on the surreal. He does not linger in the common room. He speaks in a low voice to Brothel, and a significant amount of silver is discreetly exchanged. There is a clear understanding between them. This is not a standard transaction. This is a man buying absolute discretion. Brothel, ever the pragmatist, chooses you for the assignment. Perhaps she thinks that as a relative newcomer, you are less jaded and more likely to be impressed or intimidated into silence. Or perhaps it's a test. She leads you not to one of the small, squalid rooms upstairs, but to her own private chamber at the back, the most comfortable and secure room in the house. You enter the room and the councilman is standing by the window, looking out at the darkened courtyard. He turns, and his face is not leering or lustful. It's tense, almost fearful. He is terrified of being discovered. The hypocrisy of his position hangs in the air, thick and suffocating. He is not violent or rough. In fact, he is almost polite. In a cold, distant way, the encounter is sterile and joyless, an act performed under a cloud of shame and anxiety. He speaks very little, and when he does, it is to give you quiet, simple instructions. You are a tool for a necessary, if regrettable function. Throughout the entire encounter, you are struck by the immense chasm between his public persona and his private actions. He is a pillar of the community, a man who publicly upholds the very moral code that he is now, under the cloak of darkness, flagrantly violating. This phenomenon of the pious hypocrite was a common trope in medieval literature and moralistic tales. Stories and songs were full of lustful priests, adulterous merchants, and corrupt officials who preached water and drank wine. While these were often exaggerated for satirical effect, they were rooted in a recognizable reality. The men who held power in society were just as susceptible to human desire as anyone else, but the consequences of their transgressions being discovered were far greater. This led them to seek out places like Brothels, where discretion was a commodity that could be bought. Historians often grapple with the question of clerical celibacy and the frequent accusations of clerics visiting brothels. While the ideal of a celibate priesthood was firmly established, enforcing it was another matter entirely. Court records from various medieval cities contain numerous cases of priests being fined or reprimanded for incontinence, a delicate euphemism for sexual activity. Some dioceses even tried to solve the problem by creating a system of fines that essentially functioned as an unofficial license for priests to keep mistresses. It was a pragmatic, if deeply cynical, solution to a problem that wouldn't go away. The debate still simmers: was this a sign of systemic corruption, or a practical acknowledgement of human frailty in an age that demanded an almost impossible standard from its spiritual leaders? When the transaction is over, the councilman adjusts his fine clothes, his face once again composing itself into a mask of stern dignity. He doesn't look at you. He gives you one final terse instruction: you will not speak of this to anyone. The threat is unspoken but crystal clear. He has the power to destroy you. An accusation from a woman like you against a man like him would be laughed out of any court, but he could easily use his influence to have you run out of town or worse. Your silence is not a choice, it is a condition of your continued, miserable existence. He slips out the back door, melting into the night to return to his respectable home and his pious reputation. You are left alone in the Thol's room, the scent of his expensive wool cloak still lingering in the air. You are the keeper of a secret that could ruin a powerful man, but the secret is also a cage. He has not just bought your body for an hour, he has bought your silence for a lifetime. The power imbalance is absolute. He will go back to making laws, and you will go back to being a criminal in the eyes of those very laws. The injustice of it all is a bitter pill to swallow. The secret of the councilman is a heavy stone in your gut, a constant, low-grade fear. But you soon learn that there are other secrets in the house, secrets far more dangerous because they cannot be bought or silenced. They are secrets of the body, and they grow in silence until they become impossible to hide. You begin to notice a change in Elspeth. It's subtle at first. She, who always had a pragmatic appetite, she turns her head sharply away from the smell of the greases to simmering over the hearth. She is more tired than usual, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that even the other girls, perpetually tired themselves, begin to notice. There is a new fragility in the set of her shoulders and a quiet, constant panic in her eyes. You know with a dawning, sickening certainty what this means. One night, when the house is quiet and the snores of the other girls fill the small dormitory, you feel the mattress shift. Elspeth is awake, her body tense beside yours. In the thin moonlight slanting through a crack in the shutters, you can see that she is silently crying, her shoulders shaking with repressed sob. "Elspeth," you whisper. She doesn't answer at first, and then it comes out in a choked, desperate rush. "I'm late, weeks late." The words hang in the cold air between you. A pregnancy. In this house it is the ultimate catastrophe. It is a death sentence for a girl's career, and very possibly for the girl herself. A pregnant woman cannot work. She is a liability, a drain on Brothel's precious resources. Her presence is a constant, swelling reminder of the true consequences of the trade. something everyone client and dame alike wants to ignore. The options for a woman in her position are terrifyingly few. Some women, like Lizelle's friend Catherine had mentioned, might seek out a back alley midwife for a dangerous, often fatal, herbal remedy or crude procedure. The alternative is to carry the child to term. But what then? Mathilde would never allow a baby in the house. The girl would be thrown out long before she started to show. She would be left to face childbirth alone in poverty on the streets. If, by some miracle, both mother and child survived the birth, the future was just as bleak. The child would be a filius nullius, a child of nobody, a bastard with no name, no rights, and no future. The mother, now with a baby to care for, would be unable to work, likely sinking into begging and starvation. This is why some cities and religious orders established a grim, yet merciful, invention, the founding wheel. You've heard of it, of course. The Ruota at the convent of St. Agnes on the other side of town. It's a small, rotating cylindrical cradle built into the wall of the convent. A desperate mother could place her newborn infant in the cradle, ring a bell, and then turn the wheel from the outside. The nuns on the inside would hear the bell, turn the wheel, and take the baby in, no questions asked. The mother could walk away, her anonymity preserved. It was a neat, anonymous solution to a messy, tragic problem. But what happened to the children inside? This is a point of intense debate for historians. Were these founding hospitals and orphanages truly havens of Christian charity, saving infants who would otherwise have perished? Or were they, due to overcrowding, poor sanitation, and the rapid spread of disease, simply places where death was delayed? Survival rates in these institutions were notoriously low. Leaving your child at the founding wheel was an act of profound desperation, a gamble on a slightly better chance of survival than a life on the streets. It was a choice between the impossible and the merely terrible. Elspeth's secret cannot be kept for long. Mathilde, with her hawk-like eyes, misses nothing. A few weeks later, she confronts Elspeth. There is no shouting, no public scene. It's all done with a quiet, chilling finality. Mathilde calls her into her private room, and Elspeth emerges a short time later, her face pale and devoid of all expression. She has been given a choice: leave tonight, with the few ragged clothes she owns, or be reported to the bailiffs as unfit and be forcibly removed in the morning. Mathilde, in a rare act that could be mistaken for mercy but is actually just pragmatism, gives her a few copper coins, not enough to live on, but enough to get out of the city. A runaway girl is less trouble than one who has to be officially discarded. That night, Elspeth gathers her eager belongings into a small bundle. The other girls pretend to be asleep, offering her the privacy of their feigned ignorance. She pauses by your mattress. "Be smart," she whispers, her voice a ghost of her former, pragmatic self. "It's the same advice she gave you on your first day, but now it sounds hollow, useless. Don't end up like me." She slips out of the room, and a moment later, you hear the soft creak of the back door opening and closing. And then she is gone. Your first guide, your first ally in this place, has been erased. The system has disposed of her. You are alone, and you've just inherited Elspeth Stroll as the most experienced novice in the house. It's a promotion you never wanted. The departure of Elspeth leaves a void in the house, a quiet space filled with unspoken fear. Her fate is a stark reminder of your own precarity. To distract yourself from the grim thoughts, you focus on the snippets of conversation you overhear from clients, piecing together a picture of the world outside the brothel's walls. One of the places they often talk about is the public bathish. In their telling, the bathish sounds like a center of social life, a place of relaxation and camaraderie. Merchants go there to make deals, craftsmen to gossip, and friends to spend a leisurely afternoon. They speak of the warm, steamy rooms, the massages, the food and wine served by attendants. It sounds almost civilized, a world away from the cold, functional washing alcove in Mathilde's. But you also hear the smirks and the knowing winks. You quickly understand that imagination, bathhouses and brothels are inextricably linked. The terms too is used interchangeably for both a hot bath and a brothel, and the women who worked in bathhouses were often assumed to be prostitutes. It creates a confusing picture. What, exactly, is the difference between this place and that one? You ask Kutrin, who has been in this life longer than anyone. She scoffs, a bitter, knowing sound. The difference, she says while mending a tear in a linen sheet. The difference is hypocrisy, little bird, and plumbing. She explains that while many public bathhouses were perfectly legitimate businesses offering actual baths and steam rooms, many also had private chambers where attendants, often poor women, provided services that went well beyond the back scrub. They operated in a legal and social grey area. Because they were officially bathhouses, they weren't subject to the same strict regulations as an official brothel like Brothels. They didn't have to be in a designated part of town. And the women who worked there didn't have to wear the yellow hood of shame. It's a better class of work, if you can get it, Catherine says, a hint of old resentment in her voice. The clients are richer. The work is less constant, but it's harder to get into. You need a connection. This distinction is a fascinating area of study for social historians. The medieval bathhouse was a complex institution. On one hand, it was a vital part of urban life in an age where private homes lacked running water. People went there to get clean, to socialize, and even to receive basic medical treatments like bloodletting. The larger ones were impressive structures with multiple pools, heated rooms, and gardens. On the other hand, the combination of nudity, alcohol, and men and women mixing in a relaxed setting inevitably lead to a reputation for licentiousness. Moralists, some preachers, constantly railed against the sins of the stews. This led many cities to create separate bathing times for men and women, or to close the bathhouses altogether during Lent. The question of how much sex work actually occurred in bathhouses is still a matter of debate. Some historians argue that the reputation was overblown, a product of clerical anxiety about the body and public nudity. They suggest that while some bath attendants may have offered sexual services on the side, it wasn't the primary business of most establishments. Other historians, citing court records of fines and arrests, argue that many bathhouses were essentially brothels operating under a thin veneer of legitimacy. The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle and varied greatly from city to city and from one establishment to another. A curious piece of evidence is the Bathhouse Ordinance. Many city councils, in an attempt to control the situation, issued specific rules for bathhouses. These might include forbidding beds in the building, prohibiting attendants from locking the doors of private rooms, or fining any woman who solicited a male customer. The very existence of these laws proves that the authorities were aware of what was going on and were trying, with limited success, to keep the bathing and the brothel aspects of the business separate. For you listening to Catherine, the distinction is painfully clear. The bathhouse represents a slightly higher rung on a ladder you can't even begin to climb. The women there, while likely just as exploited, had the cloak of a legitimate profession. They could walk the streets without a badge of shame. They might earn slightly better money, and they weren't trapped in a single house under the thumb of a single dame. It's another layer of the complex social geography of your world. You are at the bottom in the officially sanctioned, officially despised red light district. Above you are the women of the bathhouses, operating in a morally ambiguous but more socially acceptable space. And above them, the mistresses kept in secret by wealthy men. And at the very top, the honorable wives and daughters, whose purity your entire system is supposedly designed to protect. You look down at your own hands, red and dry from the harsh, ice-opened cold water. You think of the luxurious steam and warm pools the clients describe. The bathhouse is a symbol of a life that is tantalizingly close in geography, perhaps just a few streets away, but a universe away in status. It's a different kind of cage, perhaps, but one with slightly more gilding. The house is a pressure cooker. The combination of fear, debt, exhaustion, and the constant, grinding lack of privacy creates an atmosphere thick with resentment. The fragile solidarity between the girls is a practical necessity, but it's a thin veneer over a bubbling cauldron of individual miseries. And one cold, rainy night, the pressure cooker finally explodes. The trigger is something small and seemingly insignificant. Mathilde has acquired a bolt of cheap, brightly colored ribbon, and she announces that the girl who has earned the most that week will be given a length of it to wear in her hair. It's a classic tactic of hers, pitting the girls against each other for a pathetic prize, a meaningless scrap of color that costs her almost nothing. It's a way of reminding them that even the smallest pleasures are gifts to be bestowed by her, not rights to be had. Normally, the girls would meet this with cynical indifference. But the departure of Elspeth and the ever-present winter gloom have frayed everyone's nerves to the breaking point. The winner of the ribbon is a newer girl named N.E.A., who has, through some combination of luck and desperation, had a busy week. Brothel makes a great show of cutting the ribbon and presenting it to her. N.E.A., young and naive enough to still crave any small sign of approval, looks pleased for a moment, tying the garish red ribbon in her mousy hair. Catherine, who has been watching the whole spectacle with a thunderous expression, lets out a short harsh laugh. "Look at the little princess," she sneers, her voice dripping with contempt. "A ribbon for hurt rubbles. Don't spend it all in one place." N.E.A. flushes, her brief moment of pride turning to shame. "I earned it," she mutters, her voice defensive. "You earned it," Catherine fires back, her voice rising. She gets to her feet, her movements sharp and angry. "You earned nothing, the spider earned it. The house earned it. You just paid a little more of your rent this week than the rest of us. That ribbon is just a new chain she's put on you, you little fool." The rot root of her words hangs in the air. This isn't about the ribbon anymore. It's about everything: the debt, the exploitation, the hopelessness of their situation. All the frustration that is usually directed inward or suppressed is now aimed at N.E.A., the unwilling symbol of the house's rigged game. N.E.A., near tears, stands her ground. "You're just jealous." "Jealous?" Catherine's voice is a low, dangerous growl. "Of what? Of you? You think I want to be the pet of the week? I know what I am. At least I'm not stupid enough to be grateful for my own cage." And then she lunges. The room erupts into chaos. Catherine grabs the ribbon in N.E.A.'s hair and yanks. N.E.A. screams, a mixture of pain and outrage. The other girls, who had been watching in tense silence, are now on their feet. Some try to pull them apart, while others just watch, their faces a mixture of fear and a grim, cathartic satisfaction. A stool is knocked over. A mug smashes on the floor. Brothel comes storming out of her room, her face a mask of cold fury. "I know you, GH," she bellows, her voice cutting through the din. Her two hired thugs are right behind her. The sight of them is enough to quell the violence. Catherine lets go of N.E.A., who is now openly sobbing. The room falls into a tense, charged silence, broken only by N.E.A.'s cries and the sound of the rain lashing against the shutters. This is Brothel's greatest fear: a loss of control. An internal conflict is bad for business and a threat to her authority. Her punishment is swift and brutal. It is not aimed at fairness, but at re-establishing order. Both girls are at fault in her eyes. Catherine for starting the fight, and N.E.A. for being the cause of it. They are both confined to the small, cold storage cellar for a full day with no food. And most cruelly, she takes the offending ribbon, the catalyst of the whole affair, and contemptuously tosses it into the fire. The aftermath of the fight leaves a scar on the house. The fragile web of solidarity is torn. The girls are now wary of each other, the air thick with suspicion and resentment. The quiet cooperative system has broken down, replaced by a sullen, simmering hostility. Such internal conflicts were likely a common, if unrecorded, feature of brothel life. Historians who study the social dynamics of institutions, prisons, asylums, workhouses note that infighting is a common result of powerlessness. When residents are unable to direct their anger at their oppressors, they often turn it on each other. The system is designed to foster this, by creating competition for scarce resources like a scrap of ribbon, a better meal, or a kinder client. The authorities maintain control. A united group is a threat, a divided one is manageable. The debate among scholars as to what extent this was a conscious strategy. Was a dame like Brothel the masterful psychological manipulator, deliberately using tactics like the ribbon to divide and conquer? Or was she simply using the tools of control she knew, driven by a pragmatic need to prevent alliances that could challenge her authority? It's hard to say for sure, but the effect, intended or not, is the same. The next day, when Catherine and N.E.A. are released from the cellar, they are pale, shivering, and silent. They refuse to look at each other. The house is quieter than ever before, but it's a heavy, oppressive silence. The brief, violent explosion has changed nothing. The ledger is still full of debt, the work is still demeaning, and the walls are still standing. The only thing that has been broken is the thin, fragile bond that made it all just barely tolerable. In the tense, unhappy quiet that follows the fight, you begin to hear whispers of a place that is both a promise and a threat: the house of Saint Mary Magdalene. It's a convent on the other side of town, but not a normal one. It's a penitentiary, a reformatory, a place specifically for women like you. It's a house for fallen women who wish to repent and leave their life of sin. The idea is presented as an act of Christian charity. A woman can voluntarily commit herself to the house. In return for renouncing her past, she will be given food, shelter, and spiritual guidance. She will live a life of prayer, penitence, and hard labor, washing away her sins through work and devotion. In theory, it is the ultimate escape route, a path to salvation blessed by the church and supported by donations from pious townsfolk. Catherine speaks of it with her usual cynicism. The penitent's palace, she scoffs one evening. It's just another prison, but the warden wears a W import. You trade the spider for an abyss and the ledger for a prayer book. It's the same work, just with more kneeling. But for some of the girls, especially the younger, more frightened ones like Nia, the idea holds a powerful allure. It promises an end to the nightly terror of the clients, an end to the shame of the yellow hood, and a chance, however slim, to re-enter a state of grace in the eyes of God and society. You try to imagine what life in such a place would be like. You picture stone walls, cold floors, and endless days of scrubbing laundry, the harsh light soap replaced by holy water. You imagine a life of silence, bells, and chants, a world stripped of all color and passion, both good and bad. Is that freedom? Or is it, as Catherine says, just a different kind of cage? These institutions, often called Magdalene houses or Magdalene asylums, were a real and significant feature of the late medieval and early modern urban landscape. They existed all across Europe, a testament to the era's dual obsession with sin and redemption. They were founded on the story of Mary Magdalene, the biblical figure who was interpreted, some scholars now say misinterpreted, as a repentant prostitute who became one of Christ's most devoted followers. She was the ultimate symbol that no soul was beyond saving. The reality of life inside these houses is object of intense historical debate. Were they genuine refuges, offering women a viable and compassionate alternative to a life of exploitation? Or were they punitive, carceral institutions designed to control and punish female sexuality under the guise of religious piety? The evidence is complex and often contradictory. The rules from some of these houses have survived, and they paint a grim picture of a highly regimented, almost military existence. Inmates, a term that is often more accurate than residents, were stripped of their names and given new, religious ones. Their contact with the outside world was severed. Their days were rigidly scheduled from before dawn until after dusk, filled with prayer, religious instruction, and most importantly, hard, unpaid labor. Many of these houses operated as commercial laundries, taking in washing from the town's wealthy citizens, hospitals, and even the military. The phrase Magdalene laundry would become infamous in later centuries, but its roots are here. The work was grueling, and the profits went to the convent, not to the women. In this, it bears a striking resemblance to Mattheld's business model. The women worked to pay for their keep and their salvation, a spiritual debt that could be just as endless as a financial one. A fascinating and little-known aspect of these houses is their intake process. It wasn't always voluntary. In some jurisdictions, a magistrate could sentence a disorderly or incorrigible prostitute to a term in the Magdalene house as a form of punishment. A family might commit a wayward daughter to prevent her from bringing shame upon them. Furthermore, getting out was not always as simple as walking through the door. While some women did leave, often to enter a regular convent or to be married off in a match arranged by the institution, others were expected to remain for life, their penance never truly complete. The story of the councilman flashes in your mind. What if he were discovered? His wife, a pious and powerful woman in her own right, could easily, use her influence and a hefty donation to have you committed to the Magdalene house for life, silencing you forever under the cloak of saving your soul. It's a terrifying thought. The house is not just an escape route, it's a tool that can be used against you. One day, you see it for yourself. Mathilde sends you on an errand to a part of town you've never been to before. Your route takes you past the high, forbidding stone walls of the house of Saint Mary Magdalene. There are no red-framed doors here, only a single, massive iron-bound gate. The windows are high and narrow, like the slits in a fortress. You can hear the faint, rhythmic sound of women singing hymns, the sound both beautiful and haunting. As you hurry past, you see two women scrubbing the stone steps outside the gate, under the watchful eye of a stern-faced nun. They wear simple grey habits, their heads covered. You can't see their faces, but you see their hands, red and raw from the cold water and harsh brushes. They look no different from your own. You look at the high walls and you wonder, is this the end of the road? The final choice. To be discarded by the brothel is to die on the streets. To be saved by the Magdalene house is to be locked away forever. You are caught between the sinner and the saint, between the brothel and the convent. And you realize with a sickening clarity that both are prisons. They are just two different rooms in the same house of female confinement. The seasons turn. Winter's biting cold slowly gives way to the muddy thaw of spring, and then to the thick, oppressive heat of another summer. You have survived. You have learned the rules, the slang, the delicate art of navigating clients and Mathilde's moods. You are no longer the terrified newcomer. You are a veteran. A survival has come at a cost. The daily grind has worn you down, sanding away your hope, leaving a hard, smooth surface of resignation. The most frightening thing in the house is no longer the threat of violence or the ever-growing debt. It is the mirror, not a real mirror that is a luxury you do not have, but the reflection you see in the eyes of the other women, and most terrifyingly the reflection you see in Catherine. Catherine has been here the longest. No one knows her exact age, but the lines on her face tell a story of too many hard years. She was once sharp and cynical, her bitterness a protective shell. But now, you see something else creeping in. A weariness so profound it seems to have settled in her bones. Her movements are slower, her sharp-tongued jokes less frequent. She coughs more often, a dry, persistent hack. She is what happens when you stay. One afternoon, a rich merchant, a regular who always prefers the younger, newer girls, looks at Catherine with dismissive eyes and says to Mathilde, "Not that one. She's looking a bit long in the tooth." The comment is casual, unthinking, but it lands like a physical blow. Catherine hears it. You see her flinch, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. For the rest of the day, she is silent, withdrawn. The insult has confirmed the fear that every woman in the house lives with, the fear of aging. In this trade, youth and novelty are the most valuable commodities. Your body is your only asset, and it has a cruelly short shelf life. As you age, you attract fewer clients, and the ones you do attract are often less desirable, the ones the younger girls refuse, the ones who are rougher or pay less. Your earning potential plummets, but your debt to Mathilde, with its accumulated interest on food and lodging, continues to grow. It's a path that leads only one way to obsolescence. So what happens to a woman who grows old in a medieval brothel? This is one of the bleaker questions that social historians face, as the records tend to fall silent. The women simply disappear from the ledgers. Their ultimate fate is largely a matter of educated guesswork. Some, if they were exceptionally shrewd and lucky, might have saved a few secret coins over the years, enough to simply leave and try to start a new, anonymous life in another town, perhaps as a tavern servant or a seamstress. But this was incredibly rare. A more common path, ironically, was to become a dame more procures as herself. A woman like Catherine, with her years of experience and knowledge of the trade, might eventually take over from an aging Mathilde, or set up a smaller, illicit operation of her own. She would perpetuate the cycle of exploitation because it was the only way she knew to survive. The victim becomes the perpetrator. This is a pattern seen in many exploitative systems. For those who weren't shrewd enough to become a dame, the future was grim. They might descend into street begging, becoming one of the nameless, destitute figures on the fringes of society. Some might end their days in a municipal poorhouse or hospital, if their town had one and if they were lucky enough to gain admission, and many, weakened by years of poor nutrition, disease, and abuse, would simply die, their passing unrecorded and unmourned. There's a particularly poignant and unusual piece of historical evidence that sheds a sliver of light on this. The will of a 15th century London prostitute named Margaret Hurd has survived. In it, she leaves her few possessions, her clothes, her bed, a few household items to her friends, other women in the trade. It's a rare, personal glimpse into this world, suggesting that the bonds of solidarity sometimes lasted a lifetime and that these women tried to care for each other, even in the face of a system designed to discard them. The debate continues as to whether this was a common act of friendship or a singular, remarkable exception. You watch Catherine as she sits by the hearth, her hands idle in her lap. You see the slump of her shoulders, the hollowness in her eyes, and for the first time, you can clearly see the path stretching out before you. You can see yourself in 5 years and 10 years. You will become Catherine. Your spirit will curdle from bitterness into exhaustion. Your body will begin to fail you. You will become long in the tooth, an asset that has depreciated to zero. The realization is a cold dread that spreads through your chest. The daily horrors of this life are one thing. You have learned to endure them. But the slow, grinding, inevitable arasur of your future that is a terror of a different magnitude. It's not the fear of a sudden, violent end, but the horror of a slow living death. You look at Catherine, and you know you cannot let that happen. The thought of escape, which had been a vague, childish fantasy, begins to solidify into something hard and real. It is no longer a wish, it is a necessity. The risk of running away, being caught, beaten, publicly shamed is immense, but for the first time, it seems less terrifying than the certainty of staying. The seed of escape, planted by the chilling sight of Catherine's future mirrored in your own, begins to sprout. It's a fragile, dangerous plant that you nurture in the deepest, most secret part of your mind. You know you cannot do it alone. A plan hatched in isolation is a plan doomed to fail. You need an ally. You need an ally. You need an opportunity. The opportunity arrives in the form of a letter. A messenger brings it from Mathilde. It's from a nearby town, sealed with the crest of a minor noble house. Mathilde reads it, and a rare, genuine smile of avarice spreads across her face. The nobleman is hosting a large, multi-day feast for his son's wedding, and he requires discreet entertainment for his guests. He is essentially subcontracting Mathilde's services. Prettiest and most biddable on travel to the nobleman's estate for 3 days. A flurry of excitement and anxiety sweeps through the house. For the chosen girls, it means a trip outside the city walls, better food, and the chance to earn favor with Mathilde. For those left behind, it means a quiet house and a brief respite. You, along with Catherine and a few other girls deemed less presentable, are to remain behind to mind the house. Mathilde's instructions are clear: the house is to be closed to all business. You are to keep the doors barred and speak to no one. She will take her main set of keys with her. A secondary, smaller set will be left with Catherine, who, despite her fading value as a worker, is still the most senior and, in math eyes, the most dependable. This is it, the perfect storm. A distracted house, skeleton crew, and a set of keys in the hands of the one person who might have as much reason to leave as you do. The night before Mathilde is set to leave, you find Catherine alone, sharpening a small kitchen knife with a whetstone. The rhythmic scraping sound is the only noise in the quiet room. Your heart is pounding so hard you're sure she can hear it. Catherine, you begin, your voice a dry whisper. She doesn't look up from her work. What do you want, little bird? When she's gone, you say, forcing the words out. The keys. We could leave. She stops sharpening the knife. The silence that follows is heavy and absolute. She finally raises her head and looks at you, her eyes dark and unreadable. Leave? She scoffs, but the sound lacks its usual conviction. Leave and go where? Back to the streets? To starve? Or to the penitent's palace to scrub floors for God? There is no way, girl. It's just trading one cage for another. It's better than this, you insist. your voice gaining a sliver of strength. Better than waiting to be thrown out. Better than becoming better than just fading away. You don't say better than becoming you, but the words hang unspoken between you. She looks down at her own hands, at the swollen knuckles and the network of faint, silvery scars. She knows what you mean. This is the critical moment, the turning point. The idea of escape for women in your position is a constant theme in romantic fiction, but the practicalities were nearly insurmountable. Where would you go? Without money, family, or references, your options were virtually zero. You would be a masterless woman in a world deeply suspicious of any woman without a man or an institution to control her. You would be vulnerable to every predator, and the town watch would likely arrest you as a vagrant and have you whipped or branded. And yet, escapes did happen. Court records are filled with cases of dames suing women for fleeing while in their debt. This proves two things: first, that women were desperate enough to try, and second, that the system considered them to be property with a quantifiable monetary value. The historical debate here centers on the motivation and destination of these runaways. Did they flee with a client who had promised them a better life, a promise that was often broken? Did they try to join a band of traveling players or other marginal groups? Or did they, as you are proposing, simply take their chances on the open road, hoping that anonymity in a new city would offer them a chance to reinvent themselves? We have the records of their departure, but their arrivals are almost always lost to history. Catherine is silent for a long time, weighing the certain misery of staying against the terrifying uncertainty of leaving. She is old enough to have no illusions. She knows the odds are stacked against you. But you have reminded her of something she has long tried to forget: hope, or if not hope, then at least the possibility of a different ending to her story. Mathilde keeps a small strongbox in her room, she says finally, her voice slow and conspiratorial. Under a loose floorboard beneath her bed. It's where she keeps the emergency coin. For bribes, for when the tax man comes unexpectedly. She looks at you, a new dangerous light in her eyes. If we're going to do this, she says, we're not going to go empty-handed. We're going to take our back pay. A thrill of pure, terrifying adrenaline shoots through you. This is no longer just an escape. It's a rebellion. It's a heist. The plan is no longer just about survival, it's about justice. The morning of Mathilde's departure is a blur of organized chaos. She barks orders, checks supplies, and lines up the 3 chosen girls like prize ponies for a final inspection. She gives Catherine a long, stern lecture about her responsibilities, handing over the small ring of iron keys with a final, ominous warning: if so much as a single spoon is missing when I return, I'll have your hide. Then they are gone. The carriage rumbles away down the cobblestone street, and an extraordinary silence settles over the house. For the first time, the air doesn't feel thick with Mathilde's oppressive presence. It's just you, Catherine, and one other girl, a simple-minded creature named Lisbeth, who is unlikely to notice or interfere. The weight of the decision you have made presses down on you. This is no longer a whispered fantasy. It is real. The keys are on the table. The strongbox is upstairs. The front door is barred, but you now have the means to open it from the inside. Now, you whisper to Catherine, your mouth dry. Not yet, she says, her voice steady. She's a woman transformed. The weary resignation is gone, replaced by a cold, focused calm. We wait until dark. People are watching now. A closed house in the middle of the day is curious. To women leaving that house would be noticed. Tonight, under the cloak of the new moon, we become ghosts. The day passes in a state of suspended animation. You go through the motions of your chores, your hands trembling. Every creak of the floorboards, every shout from the street outside, sends a jolt of panic through you. Lisbeth hums to herself as she sweeps, blissfully unaware of the conspiracy unfolding around her. As dusk settles, Catherine moves into action. She goes to Lisbeth and gives her a mug of ale. Mathilde left this for us, she says, a bald-faced lie. A treat for being good. In the ale, she has crumbled a small piece of a dried poppy head, a folk remedy for sleepslands that, in a large enough dose, will ensure Lisbeth sleeps soundly through the night. It's a small cruelty, but a necessary one. Once Lisbeth is snoring softly in the dormitory, Catherine looks at you, It's time. She takes one of the sputtering candles and leads the way to Brothel private room. The room feels different without her in it, like an empty snail shell. Catherine hands you the candle. You stand watch at the door. Sing a little if you hear anyone coming. A sad song. Make it sound like you're lonely. She gets down on her hands and knees, her joints creaking, and feels along the floorboards under the bed. She finds the one that's loosened. Using the kitchen knife she was sharpening, carefully pries it up. Beneath it is a small, heavy iron box. It's locked. Your heart sinks. All this for nothing. But Catherine is not deterred. She examines the simple lock for a moment. She's greedy of spiders, she mutters. But she's cheap. She takes a long, thin piece of wire she had hidden in her sleeve, a hairpin, perhaps, straightened and sharpened. She inserts it into the lock and begins to probe. Her brow furrowed in concentration. Where did she learn this? You wonder. Was it a skill from a previous life? A trick learned from a client? It's a reminder that you know so little about the woman beside you, about the long, hard road that brought her to this place. This moment raises a fascinating question for historians. What skills, beyond their trade, did these women possess? The historical record is largely silent on their personal histories before the brothel. It's often assumed they were peasant girls or destitute servants with no other options. But this might be an oversimplification. Some women might have come from artisan families, possessing knowledge of a craft. Others might have had to Catherine's nascent lock-picking ability, gleaned from a life lived on the margins of society. The assumption of uniform helplessness might erase a more complex reality of individual resilience and hidden talents. The debate on the agency of these women, their ability to act and make choices within the incredible constraints of their lives, is a central one in the modern study of their history. After a few tense moments, there is a soft, satisfying click. The lock springs open. Catherine lifts the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of old wool, is a small hoard of coins. Not a fortune, but more money than you have ever seen in one place. Silver and copper. Enough to buy food. Enough to get you far away from this city. Catherine looks at the money, and for a moment, her hard facade cracks. A single tear traces a path through the grime on her cheek. It's a tear of vindication. She scoops up the coins, leaving a few coppers behind so the spider doesn't think she was completely cleaned out. She whispers and puts them in a leather pouch. She stands up and hands you the pouch. You carry it, she says. My hands are too used to being empty. The weight of the pouch in your hands is immense. It's the weight of your freedom. It's the weight of the risk you are about to take. You stand at the precipice of your old life and the terrifying, unknown void of a new one. The choice has been made. The plan has been executed. All that is left is to walk out the door. You stand by the red-framed door, the door that has been the beginning and end of your world for so long. It seems different now, smaller, just a piece of wood and iron. The real prison was never the lock, it was the ledger, the fear, the hopelessness. Catherine holds the heavy iron key, the one that has locked you in every night. Tonight, it will let you out. You both pull your drab cloaks around you. You don't take the yellow hoods of shame. Those you leave behind on the floor. A final, silent act of defiance. You are shedding your old skin. Ready, little bird? Catherine whispers, her voice tight with tension. You nod, unable to speak. She inserts the key into the lock. The sound of the tumblers turning is deafening in the silent house. The heavy bolt slides back with a groan that seems to echo in your very bones. Catherine pulls the door open just a crack. A sliver of the outside world appears. The cool, damp night air, smelling of rain and wet earth, rushes in. It feels cleaner, purer than any air you have breathed in months. You can see a slice of the cobblestone alley, slick and gleaming under a sliver of moon. It's the same alley you stood in, terrified and starving, on your first night. But tonight, you are not the same person. You take a deep breath, and together, you slip out into the darkness. Catherine pulls the door shut behind you, but she doesn't lock it. An unlocked door will make it look like a simple robbery, not an escape, perhaps buying you a few more precious hours before the alarm is raised. It's a smart, calculated move. You move quickly, sticking to the shadows, your soft-soled shoes making almost no sound on the wet stones. Every distant shout, every dog's bark, makes you jump. The city, which once felt like a prison, now feels like a maze filled with 1,000 unseen eyes. You are fugitives. The pouch of coins is a heavy weight at your waist, both a comfort and a danger. You navigate the labyrinth of sleeping streets, heading not for the main gate, which would be guarded, but towards a section of the old city wall that Catherine knows is poorly maintained and rarely patrolled. As you walk, the immense gravity of what you are doing washes over you. You have committed theft. You are a runaway. If you are caught, the punishment will be severe. Public whipping, branding, and being dragged back to Brothel to work off an even greater, unpayable debt. You have gambled everything on this single desperate act. This moment, this fight into the unknown, is where the historical record almost always ends. We know from court documents that women like you ran. We know they stole from their dames, but their stories become whispers, their trails go cold. What happened to them? Did they successfully blend into the teeming anonymity of another city? Did they find a different kind of work? Or were they caught, their brief taste of freedom ending in pain and retribution? This is a point of deep and sometimes frustrating debate among historians. Some, using statistical models and demographic data, argue that the odds of a successful escape and a truly new life were slim to none. A single woman with no family, no guild affiliation, and a criminal past would have found it almost impossible to survive, let alone thrive. They argue that most runaways were likely caught or died within a year. Others, however, champion a more optimistic, if less provable view. They argue for the power of human resilience. They point to anecdotal evidence of women who did reinvent themselves, who used their wits and courage to carve out new lives. They suggest that the very act of escaping, of choosing the unknown over the known suffering, is a testament to an unbreakable spirit. The truth is, we will likely never know for sure. The stories of the successful escapees are, by their very nature, the ones that were never written down. Their success depended on their anonymity. You reach the old wall. It's crumbling, with thick ivy providing handholds. Catherine, surprisingly agile, goes first, scrambling up the rough stone like a cat. She reaches the top and then helps you up. For a moment, you stand together on the wall, looking back at the sleeping city. The cathedral's spire, the jumble of rooftops, the dark, tangled streets. It all looks like a dream, a place you once knew but that no longer has any claim on you. Then you turn and look out into the darkness beyond the walls. The open countryside. The unknown, no looking back. Little bird, Catherine says, her voice firm, there's nothing for us there. She begins to climb down the other side. You follow her, your heart a wild drum of terror and exhilaration. You land softly on the damp earth outside the city. You are free. The air smells of grass and wild things. Above you, the sky is a vast, star-dusted canopy, bigger and more open than you had ever imagined. The road ahead is invisible in the darkness, a path leading to everywhere and nowhere. You have no plan, no destination, only a pouch full of stolen coins and a desperate, burning will to live. You walk forward, side by side with the only person in the world you can trust, into the terrifying, beautiful dawn of a new life. And now the story fades. The cobblestones soften under your feet, melting into the gentle path of your own rousiness. The weight of the coin pouch lightens, becoming nothing more than the comfortable weight of your blanket. The sounds of the medieval night, the distant dog, the rustle of straw are replaced by the soft, familiar hum of your own room, the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. You can let go of the fear, the cold, the desperation. They were just echoes in a story, and now they are drifting away like smoke on the wind. Catherine's fierce determination, your own pounding heart, they can rest now. You carried their burden for a little while, and now you can set it down. You walked with them out of the city gates, and saw them to the edge of their new beginning. Their road continues on into the mists of history, but your path leads you deeper into the soft and welcoming landscape of sleep. Feel the tension leaving your shoulders, a quiet unfurling. Feel your thoughts slow, becoming smooth, rounded pebbles at the bottom of a slow-moving stream. There are no more choices to be made, no more dangers to face. There is only the quiet, the dark, and the gentle pull of slumber. You are safe. You are warm. You are right where you are supposed to be, drifting peacefully toward the quiet shores of morning. The end of the article. Good night.